I didn't say a word when she left. I just stood there in the hallway, half leaning against the doorframe, watching her fix the clasp on her necklace in the hallway mirror, the one that always tilted slightly to the left no matter how often I adjusted it. She caught my eyes for half a second, maybe less. Not enough to invite a question. Just enough to let me know she didn't need my permission. She told me earlier that week about the party. It's just something casual. I haven't seen Jamie in months. Her voice was light, unbothered. She always kept it that way when she didn't want pushback. But something about it landed heavy. It was the way she said it, like it was already decided. Like she knew I wouldn't like it but hoped if she said it casually enough, I'd let it slide. And I did. But the silence that followed wasn't approval. It was resignation. That morning, I'd woken up first. Made coffee. Set out 2 mugs like I always do. She came down later, wearing that robe she saves for when she wants to seem warm. Said good morning like nothing was off, then reached right past me to grab her phone, already buzzing. She had a smile for someone else. Not me. The rest of the day moved in pieces. She packed a small clutch, reapplied her lipstick twice, changed her earrings 3 times. I watched from the corner of the room, pretending to read, pretending to scroll. She never asked me to come. Never asked me how I felt. And I didn't offer it. Maybe that's where we were now, 2 people who didn't say what needed to be said because we already knew the answers would sting. When she finally stepped out the door, her perfume lingered longer than she did. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I didn't check her location like I used to, back when trust was something I didn't have to second guess. Instead, I turned off the lights, made a bowl of cereal for dinner, and sat in the dimness of our living room for hours, letting the silence fill the space between who we were and who we had become. The clock blinked past midnight. Then 1 a.m. Still no word. No, headed home. No, love you. Not even a hey. My mind started building stories I didn't want to watch, music too loud to hear her phone, a drink in her hand, laughter too easy, a hand on her waist that didn't belong to me. I hated that I imagined it. I hated more that I couldn't rule it out. When I finally went to bed, I left the porch light on. Not for her safety, she always said that was outdated, but for me. I needed to know when she came back. I needed to hear the key in the lock and know, at least physically, she still returned to the same place I did. But I don't remember hearing the door. The next morning, I woke up alone. Her side of the bed was barely touched, the pillow still fluffed, the sheet not yet warmed. She was downstairs, humming softly while making breakfast, as if nothing had shifted, as if the night hadn't stretched me in silence. She turned when she saw me and smiled. Morning. You want eggs? And right then, standing at the top of the stairs, I realized something. It wasn't the party. It wasn't the earrings or the silence or even the fact that she went knowing I was against it. It was the ease. The ease with which she lived in a different emotional world from mine. She hadn't lied. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't cheated, as far as I knew. But somehow, it still felt like betrayal. And I hadn't even asked her a single question yet. I told her I wasn't hungry, even though my stomach had been growling since the moment I opened my eyes. It wasn't about the food. It never is, really. Sometimes it's about the way it's offered. The way someone says, you want eggs, like it's enough to mend whatever cracked open between you. Like sizzling butter in a pan can rewind a night full of silence. She acted normal. Not pretend normal, but genuinely casual, too casual. That carefree humming again. I never noticed how much it irritated me until that moment. She never hummed around me anymore. That tune was new. Light. Something she picked up from somewhere else. Maybe someone else. And I hated that thought, how quickly it attached itself to the silence she left me in the night before. Maybe it was nothing. But maybe not. I sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on my knees, hands locked. I watched her float around the kitchen like nothing had shifted. The way her bare feet moved across the tile like she belonged, like she was at peace. I wanted to ask her what time she got in. I wanted to ask if she had fun. I wanted to ask 100 things that boiled just below the surface of my tongue. But what I did instead was sip water and stay silent. It felt safer somehow. Because once you let one question slip, the rest come crashing behind it, and I wasn't sure I was ready to hear her answers. She placed her plate on the counter and leaned against it, scrolling through her phone like Sunday mornings were still ours. I looked at her, really looked, not the casual glance you give someone you've lived beside for years. I tried to see her as if I didn't know her. And in that moment, I didn't. She wore the same oversized hoodie she always stole from my drawer, sleeves bunched around her wrists. Her hair was tied up in that messy way I used to find irresistible. But now I was stuck on the detail she didn't think I'd notice, the bracelet on her wrist that wasn't there yesterday. The faint shimmer of glitter near her hairline. The trace of perfume that didn't smell like her usual brand. "Did you have a good time?" I asked, finally. She paused for a second. Just a beat. Then smiled and nodded. "Yeah, it was fun. Lots of catching up. Jamie's wild, as usual. That was it. No elaboration. No photos. No funny story to fill the air. She didn't even offer to show me anything, and she always used to. That, more than anything, told me something had shifted. She was protecting the memory of that night, guarding it like a fragile keepsake. Something private. And I knew then that it was no longer just about the party. I wanted to press further. I wanted to ask why she went when she knew I wasn't comfortable with it. But all I could manage was another sip of water and a tight-lipped nod. And in that space between her answer and my silence, a new kind of loneliness settled. One I didn't recognize. One that didn't come from being alone, but from being next to someone who no longer met you halfway. The rest of the morning passed in small talk and unfinished chores. She laughed at something on her phone, and I flinched at the sound. I mowed the lawn even though it didn't need it. She folded laundry she didn't offer to do yesterday. We moved like polite strangers trying to avoid stepping on each other's shadows. And maybe that's what we were now, people orbiting the same house with different gravity. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk pretending to work, staring at a spreadsheet that hadn't changed in an hour. My eyes kept drifting to her name saved on my phone, even though she was just a room away. I opened our chat, scrolled back through old messages, saw the way we used to joke, the photos she used to send just because, the way she used to say, "Come home, I miss you," even when I was only gone for errands. I hadn't seen that version of her in months. And here's the thing that caught in my throat. I wasn't even sure she noticed the difference. Maybe that's what made it worse. Maybe that's what made it feel like betrayal, not some grand act, not a secret rendezvous, not some other man waiting at the door. But the quiet forgetting. The way she forgot how to reach for me. The way she made peace with a kind of distance I still hadn't agreed to. That night, she fell asleep early. Her breathing was steady, calm. I lay next to her, eyes wide open, wondering how much of her was already gone. Wondering if I was the only one feeling like something irreversible had just begun. And still, I hadn't asked a single real question. She never asked why I didn't text her while she was out. She didn't ask if I waited up, or if I'd been worried, or if I'd cared at all. That was the first thing I noticed. She was always the kind of person who asked questions, even when they were unnecessary. Did you miss me? Were you lonely? Do I still make your heart skip? All those small, playful, ridiculous things you say when you still believe you're the center of someone's world. But this time, there was nothing. Just a plate of eggs, a warm smile, and a whole new kind of distance. I kept thinking about that. She went to that party, and whether or not anything actually happened wasn't the point. The point was, she didn't look back. Not before she left. Not when she got in. Not even the next morning. And that told me more than any confession ever could. It told me that I had stopped being part of her internal world. I was someone to inform, not someone to consider. And that difference, though quiet, was sharp. We had lunch in silence. Not angry silence, just empty. I asked about her plans for the week, just to break the nothingness, and she listed them off like a robot. Tuesday lunch with Maggie. Wednesday morning yoga. A hair appointment Friday. No mention of us. No, maybe we could do something. No room left in the schedule. I nodded along, pretended to scroll through my phone after, but really I was staring at the floor, wondering how two people in the same house could live so separately. I remembered a time not long ago when she used to pause her entire day if I had a bad one. I remembered her texts. "Want to meet for coffee?" I saw this and thought of you. Now the only time she reached for me was when her charger wasn't plugged in right and she needed help untangling the cord. Late that afternoon, she took a nap on the couch. I watched the sunlight fall across her face and tried to feel the same way I used to, but something had dulled. It wasn't that she wasn't beautiful. It wasn't even that I loved her less. It was just that I couldn't reach her anymore. Like she was underwater, smiling at me through the surface, and I was standing on the shore, waving, pretending it was enough. And I started to wonder, maybe this isn't about a party. Maybe it never was. Maybe this is what happens when two people go too long without truly looking at each other. When one person stops fighting to be understood and the other stops noticing. She stirred in her sleep, rolled over, whispered something I couldn't make out. I wanted to believe it was my name. I really did. But I don't think it was. I don't think I ever realized how loud the refrigerator was until that Monday morning. I was home late from work, earlier than her, and the house just hummed. No TV, no soft music, no coffee brewing. Just the fridge motor ticking on and off, like it was the only thing left with a routine. She had left a note on the counter. A post-it, actually yellow, curled at the edge. It read, "Don't forget to sign the insurance form. Should be on your desk. Merrily." Not love, merrily. Not hugs and kisses. Just a name. Like a colleague. Like I was part of her paperwork. I stood there staring at it longer than I should have. The fridge clicked again, and I peeled the note off slowly, pressing the sticky part between my fingers. It didn't matter what the note said. It was the way she chose to say it, the way her handwriting looked too neat, like she'd taken time to make sure her looped letters didn't curve too far, didn't say too much. When she came home, it was like the weather changed. She walked in like she had somewhere else to be, keys dropped fast, bag set down with purpose. She didn't see me standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the den. Or maybe she did and just didn't acknowledge it. Hard to tell anymore. I said, "Hey," and she said it back, but her eyes never met mine. They were already scanning the living room, checking things off in her head that I wasn't part of. She smelled faintly of citrus, not the scent she usually wore. Not bad. Just different. Different enough that I noticed. I caught myself wondering if it came from a store sample or someone else's passenger seat. I hated the thought, not because I believed it, but because I didn't immediately reject it. That's what hurt. The fact that my brain even allowed that kind of idea in. We had dinner, if you could call it that. 2 separate plates, eaten 20 minutes apart. She said she wasn't that hungry. I didn't ask why. Afterward, she went upstairs early. Said she had a weird headache and needed sleep. But when I walked past the bedroom 20 minutes later, I could see the faint glow of her phone lighting her face. She wasn't asleep. She was somewhere else entirely, wherever that phone took her. I wanted to ask her who she was talking to, but what would that accomplish? Either she'd lie, or worse, tell the truth. So I just kept walking. That night I didn't sleep. I lay there next to her, watching the ceiling fan spin slow circles, feeling like an unwanted extra in my own life. I kept thinking about that post-it, the new perfume, the way she didn't even notice the lasagna I'd made was the same kind she used to beg for back when we still had candlelit dinners just because. She didn't even say thank you. Not once. And it wasn't out of cruelty, that's the thing. It was something colder. Like forgetting to notice me had become a habit. At 2:14 a.m., she shifted in her sleep. Rolled toward me for the first time in weeks. Her hand landed near mine, barely grazing my wrist. My breath hitched, like I was a teenager again, hoping for something more. But it was just a sleep movement. She pulled away moments later, tucking herself deeper under the quilt. Like even in dreams, we weren't in sync anymore. And as I stared into the dark, I realized the scariest part wasn't that she might be hiding something from me. It was that she might not even feel the need to. Act I the mug. I stood in front of the cabinet longer than usual this morning, looking at the row of mismatched mugs we've collected over the years, the ones that made us laugh in gift shops, or came back with us from road trips. I reached for the one she always used, the faded blue one with the chip near the handle, but then I stopped. She hadn't used it in weeks. Lately, she'd been using a new white ceramic one with no history, no personality. Just something she picked up from a boutique downtown, part of some minimalist phase I didn't understand. I made coffee for one. Not out of spite. Not to make a statement. I just didn't see the point anymore. When something becomes a ritual only for you, it stops being a shared thing. It becomes a performance. And this morning, I was too tired for performance. Act 2, the envelope. Around noon, I noticed a thick envelope on the side table, sealed, neatly stacked on top of a glossy magazine. Her name was written in cursive. No return address. I stared at it for a while before walking past it. Then I walked back. Still didn't touch it. Just stood there, wondering if it was what I feared, or something worse, something I hadn't even thought of yet. She came in around 12:40, wearing sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. Said she had a short lunch with a friend. Didn't say who. Didn't offer to sit with me or talk about her morning. She saw the envelope, casually picked it up, and walked upstairs without a word. Like it was nothing. Maybe it was. But her silence about it made it feel like everything. Act 3, the call. At 6:17 p.m., her phone rang while she was in the shower. She always used to leave it lying around, but now it's constantly glued to her, unless she's behind a closed door. I glanced at the screen. It just said, no caller ID. I didn't answer. I didn't even think about it. But something about the timing, the way she just texted someone before heading to the bathroom, made it stick in my mind. When she came out, wrapped in a towel and humming again, always that humming, I expected her to ask if her phone had gone off. But she didn't. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, tapped it once, and walked away like nothing had happened. Later that evening, I asked her, casually, "Everything okay today?" She said, "Yeah, why?" I shrugged. "Just wondering." She smiled faintly. "I'm fine, Halden. You worry too much." That was it. Not even a kiss goodnight. Postscript, the space. I stayed up again. Not to snoop. Not to listen. Just to feel something, maybe. The light under our bedroom door flickered once around midnight, like she'd gotten up and changed her mind about sleep. I didn't move. I didn't go to her. I just sat in the hallway, back against the wall, staring into that narrow beam of light that separated me from her. And I realized, that light? It's been there for weeks now. We just stopped calling it what it is. Distance. I found her jacket by the door again. Not the one she wears to the office. Not the one for rain. The other one, the one she said she hadn't worn since last fall. Light green, with a collar that folds just enough to frame her neck the way she used to like. I hadn't seen it in months. And now it was there, draped over the edge of the bench like it had come home late, just like her. She was upstairs when I saw it. I didn't ask. I didn't even touch it. I just looked at it for a long time, like it was supposed to tell me something. It didn't. That evening, we sat in the same room and didn't speak. She was scrolling. I was pretending to read. She laughed at something her phone showed her, then caught herself and looked up, not at me, just in my direction, like she remembered I was still part of the space. I gave her a tired smile, one of those automatic things you do out of old habit. She didn't notice. Eventually, I said, "You wore the green jacket?" She blinked like the question caught her off guard. "Yeah, it was chilly out." I nodded. "You said it didn't fit anymore." "Oh, I guess it does now." That was the whole exchange. It was nothing. And yet it wasn't. We used to fill hours with nothing. Now our nothing had become brittle, sharp-edged. Words tossed like pebbles, making ripples we didn't want to admit were there. Later, I did something I'm not proud of, but I won't lie about it. I opened the hall closet. Quietly. Slowly. The kind of slow that means you know you shouldn't be doing it. Inside were shoes I hadn't seen before. Not brand new, but not familiar either. Flats, beige, scuffed slightly near the toe. Size 6. Her size. Not unusual for a woman to buy shoes. But she always told me when she did. Always made a little show of it. This time, nothing. Just silence. Another secret that wasn't technically a secret, but still managed to whisper. I shut the door without touching them. At dinner, she told me she was going to help Jamie with something Saturday. Just for a few hours, she said, voice light. Probably around 4. I'll be back by 8. I looked at her face when she said it. She didn't blink. She didn't stutter. But something in her tone felt practiced, like she'd run the line in her head before I came into the room. I thought Jamie was out of town, I said quietly. She paused just half a second too long. She got back early. No apology. No details. No invitation to ask more. And I didn't. After she went to bed, I stayed in the living room with the lights off. The quiet wrapped around me the way guilt does, tight, breathless, familiar. I thought about the shoes, the jacket, the half-second pauses that were starting to pile up into something larger than doubt. But the truth is, I wasn't afraid she was lying. I was afraid she wasn't. I was afraid that everything she was doing, the jacket, the schedule changes, the lack of eye contact, was her honest self, out in the open. No hiding. No pretending. Just done. And I didn't know how to ask, "Are you still in this?" without sounding like I already knew the answer. So instead, I sat in the dark and listened to the house breathe. One slow creak at a time. 4:15. That's when she left. She wore jeans, not the usual black leggings, and a new top I hadn't seen before. Cream-colored. Soft neckline. Something in the way it hung off her shoulder felt curated. Not overdressed, not obvious, just intentional. Like someone trying to look effortless while making sure they weren't. I watched from the window. Not like a spy, not hunched or hidden. Just standing there with a cold mug in my hand and a chest full of words I didn't speak. She didn't see me. Or if she did, she didn't acknowledge it. The car pulled out like it always does. Smooth, no rush. Not the way people drive when they're late. I stood in the same spot for too long. Not waiting. Just standing. The sun through the window shifted across the hardwood like it was the only thing willing to stay in motion. By 5:30, I'd rearranged the living room. It wasn't planned. I moved a chair, then the rug, then all the cushions. Looking for something to do. Something to control. I never realized how crooked the lamp was. or how many crumbs had fallen between the cushions. I vacuumed twice. Not because it needed it. Because I needed to feel like something could be cleaned. At 6:20, I checked the porch. Nothing. At 6:21, I did it again. I never used a clock watch like this. Never counted minutes like they meant something. But that's what waiting does. It distorts you. Turns you into someone who thinks, why wasn't 6 enough? And why not a quick check-in? And does she even think I'm wondering? At 7:05, I caught myself staring at the hallway mirror. Not at the reflection, just the frame. It was tilted again. Same way it always leans no matter how often I straighten it. A stubborn tilt. Like us. 7:30. I heard a car door. Then nothing. Then the key. She came in like weather, light on her feet, voice casual. Hey, sorry I'm late. Jamie had me stay for dinner. Then she tossed her bag down and headed to the kitchen like it was any other night. Not even a pause at the door. No glance to see what I was doing. No curiosity in her tone. I asked, how is it? She poured water. It was fine. I waited. Nothing else came. A few minutes later, she mentioned that Jamie's cousin dropped by. Said something vague about him being funny. Didn't give a name. Didn't say how long he stayed. I didn't ask. I just nodded and watched her shoulders. They were relaxed. Like everything she said was true. Or like she didn't care whether I believed her. We watched a show together after that. Something we'd started weeks ago. I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about that cousin. About the word funny. About the way she leaned back on the couch and scrolled through her phone while pretending to watch. Her laugh was delayed twice. Like it was practiced. At one point, I glanced over. She was smiling at something on her screen. Not the show. I didn't ask, and she didn't offer. At 10:15, she went upstairs. At 10:17, I sat alone in the kitchen again, looking at the chair she didn't touch, the coffee mug I didn't clean, and the crumbs that had somehow returned to the rug no matter how many times I vacuumed. She left the house early that morning, earlier than usual, before I was even out of bed. I heard the front door close and waited for the sound of the car, not out of suspicion anymore, but habit. It started that way, yes, but lately it had become something else. A rhythm. A quiet moment to feel the weight of a house settling into silence. I didn't get up right away. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the things I'd never said, not because I wasn't allowed to, but because somewhere along the way, I convinced myself they wouldn't land, that they wouldn't matter, that she'd already stopped listening, or maybe I had stopped speaking in ways that meant anything. But that morning, something felt different. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just still. Like the storm had finally moved past and all that remained was a calm, wide field of air where clarity could finally sit. I got up, made coffee, but this time I made 2 cups. I placed hers at the usual spot, not out of ritual, but out of choice. A gentle offering. Then I went upstairs and opened the window in the bedroom. The breeze was soft, enough to move the curtain but not the frame. For the first time in weeks, I didn't touch the mirror to straighten it. I let it tilt. I spent most of that day clearing space. Physically, yes, drawers, old boxes, the half-dead plant by the back door, but also mentally. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't counting hours. I wasn't replaying glances or guessing who Jamie's cousin was. Instead, I made a list. Not of complaints or suspicions. Not of questions I knew she wouldn't answer. A real list. Of what I missed. Of what I needed. Of who I was when we still looked at each other without hesitation. It wasn't a long list, but it was honest. And when she came home, something in her posture shifted as soon as she saw me. I wasn't cold. I wasn't distant. I was just there, completely present, coffee in one hand, the list folded in my pocket. She paused at the door. For the first time in weeks, she paused. We sat at the table without music or background noise. She asked if I had a good day. I said, I had a real one. Then I pulled out the list and slid it across the table. I'm not accusing you of anything, I said. And I'm not asking you to defend anything. This isn't about yesterday or last weekend. This is about now. This is about whether we still have a we. Because if we do, I'm still here. But if we don't, I need to stop living in your shadow. She stared at the paper for a long time before she touched it. And then she cried. Not the kind of crying that comes from guilt. Not the kind that spills because someone got caught. It was something quieter. A grief, maybe, for how far things had drifted, and a small flicker of relief that someone finally said it out loud. We didn't solve everything that night. We didn't promise anything dramatic. But we stayed at that table for hours. And for the first time in a long time, It wasn't about what was missing. It was about what might still be possible.